Redemption is often portrayed as something grand, like kings abandoning their thrones for the sake of morality, or warriors laying down their weapons to embrace peace, but in reality redemption is far more intimate. It is the subtle transformation that takes place when a heart learns to value what it once overlooked. A billionaire, despite his immense fortune, can find himself hollow, stripped of joy, surrounded by things but not people, living in excess but starved of meaning. To the outside world he has everything, yet inside he carries an emptiness so wide that it mocks every dollar he ever earned. Wealth promises freedom, but what happens when the body begins to fail and the end draws near? What does money mean when death stands at the door, indifferent to status, blind to fortune, unstoppable by influence? It is in those moments, when life reveals its fragility, that redemption becomes more than a word, it becomes a desperate search for significance. A man who has spent decades chasing wealth may find himself suddenly aware of the people he never truly saw. His fortune, while capable of buying cars, houses, companies, and even luxuries beyond imagination, cannot rewind time. It cannot repair broken family bonds or restore trust. It cannot erase the loneliness that sits at his bedside as his body weakens. Wealth may give him the finest hospital suite and the best physician's money can secure, but it cannot give him the warmth of a child's laughter, the embrace of a loved one who cares for him not because of his money but because of who he is. The billionaire, in this fragile state, becomes the perfect vessel for a story about humanity, because his journey forces him to confront the limits of power. At the brink of death, he is stripped down to being human, no different than the homeless man or woman he may have once ignored while riding past in his limousine. Humanity is the great equalizer. It does not care whether one lives under a golden roof or beneath a torn blanket on the street. The hunger for love, the desire for purpose, the yearning for connection, these are universal. When the billionaire meets a homeless girl with a child, it becomes more than just a meeting of two worlds, it is the collision of realities that reveal truths both sides might never have seen alone. The girl, hardened by survival yet softened by the love she carries for her child, represents resilience, the raw power of hope that refuses to die even in suffering. She embodies what the billionaire lost in his pursuit of wealth, the capacity to cherish simple moments, to find light even in the darkest corners. The child, innocent and untainted, becomes the silent symbol of a future not yet ruined, a reminder that life is not only about what we accumulate but about what we nurture. Redemption flows naturally from this encounter, because the billionaire sees in the girl and her child something he cannot buy. He sees love without transaction, hope without guarantee, trust without contract. For the first time, he becomes aware that humanity cannot be measured in net worth but in compassion, in the willingness to step outside oneself and carry another's burden, even if only for a moment. He may offer her food, shelter, money, or even more, but what truly begins to redeem him is not the act of giving material things, it is the recognition that his soul has been starved of genuine connection and that helping her feeds something in him he did not know was dying. Redemption here is not about wiping away his past mistakes but about embracing a new way of seeing before it is too late. The theme of redemption shines brighter when we realize that the billionaire is not the savior of the girl and her child, instead, they save him in a way that medicine cannot. She awakens the dormant part of him that once believed in kindness, in humanity, in family. Perhaps he once had a child of his own but lost touch while consumed by building empires. Perhaps he once loved but neglected that love for meetings, mergers, and investments. The girl and her child become mirrors reflecting what he abandoned along the way. His heart, cold and mechanical for years, begins to feel again. That is the essence of redemption, not the rewriting of the past but the reclaiming of humanity in the present. There is a paradox in this theme that makes it profoundly moving. The billionaire, who has every reason to command and control, suddenly finds himself humbled by the strength of a girl who has nothing. She survives without wealth, yet she radiates a resilience stronger than his billions. She protects her child fiercely, she endures hunger without surrendering her dignity, and in her presence he learns that poverty does not strip away humanity, it often sharpens it. For the billionaire, this is both a lesson and a form of salvation. His money could not teach him this, only proximity to raw suffering and raw love could. Redemption, then, is not in giving away his fortune but in finally understanding the true value of life, in seeing what was invisible while he was blinded by gold. Humanity in this story is not one-sided. While the billionaire begins to change, the girl too must wrestle with her perception. She may distrust him at first, viewing him as another wealthy man who could never understand her struggle. But humanity bridges that gap when she notices his frailty, his sickness, his mortality. She sees him not as a billionaire but as a dying man, alone, scared, craving connection just as much as she craves stability for her child. Her humanity allows her to soften, to accept help without shame, and perhaps even to share pieces of her life story with him. She, too, participates in redemption, not by receiving wealth but by offering the billionaire what he lacks most, sincere human connection. In this way, humanity flows in both directions, transforming giver and receiver alike. Redemption is never loud, it is quiet, almost invisible to the outside world. To others, it might look like a wealthy man helping a homeless family, but beneath the surface, it is the healing of a soul. For the billionaire, it may be the first time he feels peace as he prepares for death. For the girl, it may be the first time she feels seen not as a burden on society but as a human being worthy of care. For the child, it may be the first memory of kindness that shapes how he grows into the world. Each of them experiences a form of redemption, though in different ways. The billionaire redeems his humanity, the girl redeems her dignity, and the child redeems the future that once looked bleak. Together, they form a small circle of healing, proving that even the briefest encounters can change everything. The story anchored in this theme teaches that true wealth lies not in possessions but in relationships, not in empires but in empathy. A billionaire with a dying body can be poorer in spirit than a homeless girl with a child, and yet through connection both can enrich one another. Redemption is not reserved for saints or the privileged, it is available to anyone who chooses to see another person as human, to act in love instead of indifference. And in this encounter, redemption is not about erasing the billionaire's past but about giving his life a final chapter worth remembering. Every story of change carries a moment when two separate worlds collide, a moment that reshapes both paths forever. The turning point is rarely dramatic in the sense of fire or thunder, often it arrives in silence, in an unexpected meeting that at first seems ordinary, but in hindsight becomes the seed of transformation. A dying billionaire meeting a homeless girl with a child is one such moment, a crossing of lives that would otherwise never touch. He belongs to the world of power, privilege, and influence, while she belongs to the world of struggle, hunger, and survival. Yet fate draws them together, not to highlight their differences, but to awaken in both of them the humanity that transcends those differences. This moment of connection becomes the anchor for everything that follows, because it is here that walls crumble, wounds are exposed, and the possibility of redemption blooms. For the billionaire, the turning point begins as an inconvenience. Perhaps he is out for one of his final drives, escorted in a car to breathe the city air he had long ignored. His health is failing, doctors have given him a timeline, and every day feels like sand slipping through his hands. He notices little anymore, his mind is clouded with regrets, his body weighed down by illness. Yet on a corner, by the shadows of tall glass buildings that once represented his empire, he sees her. A girl not much older than his own daughter might have been, if he had stayed in her life, sits with a child in her arms. The contrast is too sharp for him to dismiss. She is not begging loudly, not crying out for help, simply holding her child close, whispering something into the little one's ear, her eyes reflecting a storm of fatigue and fierce determination. For a man who has built towers and bought governments, this quiet resilience unsettles him more than any stock market crash ever did. The girl, on the other hand, notices him not as a savior but as a figure she instinctively distrusts. The wealthy, in her experience, do not stop for people like her. They walk past, eyes averted, as if poverty is contagious. Yet this man is different. He does not hurry by, nor does he sneer. He lingers, watching with an expression she cannot read, part sorrow, part recognition. She braces herself for pity, a look she has grown used to, the kind that wounds more than indifference, but what she receives instead is something quieter, an honest curiosity. In that instant, she sees not a billionaire, not a man of untouchable status, but an old soul burdened by something invisible. His sickness may not be obvious at first, but the weight in his stance, the trembling in his hands, betray him. She realizes that in his own way, he is fighting to survive too. The child becomes the invisible thread that ties them together. The billionaire's gaze drifts from the girl's tired eyes to the child's innocent face, and something pierces him. He remembers another child, maybe his own, long estranged, or perhaps he remembers his younger self, when life was simpler, before ambition swallowed him whole. The sight of the small, fragile life nestled against a mother's chest awakens emotions he thought were long buried. Children, after all, carry no judgment, no agenda. They simply exist, dependent, trusting, pure. In the child's presence, the billionaire feels stripped of titles and wealth. He is simply a man witnessing innocence he can never return to. This is the exact point where the turning begins, not with words, but with recognition. Connection deepens when one chooses to act. The billionaire, against the habits of a lifetime, steps closer. Perhaps he offers money at first, clumsy in his attempt to help, as though the only language he has ever known is currency. But the girl, proud despite her circumstances, resists. She does not want to be bought, she wants to be seen. Her refusal shocks him, because all his life people have taken his money without hesitation, craving his approval, bowing to his wealth. Yet here is someone who refuses, who values her dignity above survival itself. This act alone cuts through him like nothing else could. It is the first time he confronts the possibility that money cannot solve everything, that sometimes it builds walls rather than bridges. The girl's courage, hidden beneath layers of exhaustion, unsettles him but also humbles him. He lowers his hand, uncertain, and for the first time in years asks a genuine question, "Are you all right?" Those words, small and imperfect, become the bridge. For the girl, that question is the turning point. She has been asked for her story before, but always with judgment in the background, always with an undertone of superiority. This man, however, sounds different. His voice trembles not with disgust but with fatigue, as though he is carrying his own invisible burden. She sees the sincerity, feels the weight behind his question, and against her instinct to remain guarded, she replies. She does not pour her heart out immediately, but she allows a sliver of her truth to show, that she is trying to protect her child, that life has been unkind, that hope is fragile but not yet broken. And as she speaks, the billionaire listens, truly listens, not with the intent to fix or to command, but to understand. This listening is the essence of the connection, because for once the girl feels less invisible, and for once the man feels less alone. The turning point does not erase their struggles. The billionaire is still dying, his wealth still meaningless in the face of mortality. The girl is still homeless, still fighting for each meal. Yet something shifts in that moment that makes both futures different from what they would have been. He sees in her and her child a chance to leave behind a legacy that is not made of steel and concrete but of compassion. She sees in him not just a dying man, but a reminder that suffering is universal, that humanity unites even the most divided worlds. Their connection becomes a mirror for both. She reflects his lost humanity, and he reflects her untapped hope. Together, they carve a space where dignity, love, and mortality intersect. It is this turning point that transforms the narrative from one of despair to one of possibility. Without it, the billionaire would die bitter and alone, his fortune scattered, his name remembered only in business circles. Without it, the girl would remain unseen, her struggle unnoticed, her child growing up in shadows. But through their connection, everything changes. He finds peace in giving not just money but himself, his time, his attention, his story. She finds strength in realizing that even the most powerful can fall, and that she, despite her poverty, carries a resilience worth more than gold. The child, though too young to grasp the weight of the moment, will one day remember the kindness of a stranger who chose to see, and that memory will shape his understanding of humanity. The turning point of connection is powerful precisely because it is fragile. It rests on a choice, his choice to stop and see, her choice to trust and speak. Without either, the worlds would remain separate, the story untold. But with both, a bridge forms that alters the course of 3 lives. It proves that no matter how vast the gulf between wealth and poverty, between sickness and survival, between despair and hope, a single act of genuine connection can collapse the distance. It is not the grand gestures but the willingness to pause, to acknowledge, to share humanity, that changes everything.